to welcome everybody to Fire Live and our next session. In the session, I am joined by Andrea White, the founder of Women Talking Fire, and she's from A W Fire. We'll be discussing gender diversity in the fire industry. So Andrea, thank you so much for being here. Can you just begin by giving us a brief introduction of yourself, your career and your involvement with the Women Talking Fire group?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Rebecca, and thank you for having me. So I'm Andrea White, and I'm an independent fire engineer and a fire risk assessor. I have my own consultancy, like you say, A W Fire. I do a lot of volunteering and public speaking in the industry, and I'm also very proud to say that this year I was listed as one of the top 100 most influential women in the construction industry. So very proud of that. As you say, I'm also the founder of Women Talking Fire, and that's an independent women's networking and support group for the UK fire safety industry.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to be able to catch up. And like you say, you're incredibly influential in the industry, so I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Just to circle on Women Talking Fire, what was the driving force behind the creation of this group, and what's its core objectives?
Yeah, so I established Women Talking Fire because it's a group that I wish had been in existence when I began my career in fire safety, and that was almost 25 years ago now. And even now, I just felt there was a real need to bring women working in fire safety together and an opportunity to support them, and also to increase the visibility of women in our industry. So that's really what Women Talking Fire is all about.
No, definitely, and I think it's a great cause and one that we're proud to partner with as well. So thank you. And historically, like you say, the fire industry has been a pretty much male-dominated industry. So, in your opinion, what factors have contributed to this gender imbalance?
That's a good question. So I can remember back at the start of my career when there were probably only one or two other women that I'd even heard about who worked in fire safety, let alone actually getting to meet them. And I think that was probably because back then most fire safety professionals came out of the fire service after perhaps a career as a firefighter. And obviously the majority of firefighters now, and even more so back then, they were male. So I'm really pleased to say, if we fast forward to today, 20 years later, things are improving, and we now have approximately 7% of our workforce in fire safety that's female.
It's definitely been refreshing, I think, over especially the past, I think, couple years more so than ever, to see that progression and that emphasis on diversifying the fire industry, and to see it come have a big positive light shined on it, actually. Doesn't mean that there's not big strides to go, obviously, but 7% is still a very low number, but it's a lot larger number than it was previously. So it's been really, really good to be a part of that and help kind of shed some light on that as well. Can you share some of the challenges and barriers that women often face when entering or progressing in the fire industry?
Yeah, so we know that for every 100 men who are promoted from entry level to manager, only 87 women are promoted. And we know from research as well that men tend to get promoted on potential, whereas women get promoted on experience. So we're not really seeing a level playing field there. And that brings in probably the biggest obstacle facing women, I would say, what's termed the broken rung. That's a term for women struggling to successfully make that first step up to manager. And I would suggest that, I mean, there's probably lots of issues, but let me give you two of the ones that come to mind for me. Firstly, men are more likely to apply for positions even when they don't meet all of the criteria. Whereas conversely, women tend to wait until they meet 100% of the criteria before applying. So we're playing by different rules, aren't we, in the game of promotion? And how does it help us to know that fact? Well, if you're a woman and you know that your competition isn't necessarily going to meet all the criteria, you're potentially more likely to apply on that basis rather than wait, perhaps. So I would say, if we can encourage women to apply for positions they want, even if they aren't 100% qualified, that might help to overcome that barrier. And then the second barrier that springs to mind is gender norms. So traditional gender stereotypes, such as women being taught to be and expected to be more nurturing, more supporting, more passive, more sensitive, perhaps to other people's feelings. Women are taught to be people pleasers, aren't they? And sort of self-sacrifice and put the needs of everyone else in front of their own. And I think, when you contrast that with masculine stereotypes, we've got their sort of dominance, decisiveness, perhaps being blunt, and maybe even a little bit less sensitive to other people's feelings. And when individuals don't conform to those gender stereotypes, then it can kind of jar with our expectations, really. And then we end up with women who do speak up and are confident, but then they're labelled as sort of too much or too outspoken. Because a woman speaking up, that sort of conflicts with our gender norms. I think if a man did the same thing, then potentially it would be viewed as confidence or assertiveness. I think that's really where the double bind happens for women. Men can be powerful and likeable, but I think what we've seen is that women who are more powerful, they can appear they come across as more powerful, but then they're less liked because of that. So I think what we really need to try and do is remove that unconscious bias that we might have when we see or hear someone, and maybe look at what they're saying or what they're doing rather than perhaps what they look like.
No, exactly. And just going back to the point you said about, applications, it even comes down to the type of language that is used in applications, where men and women and, other genders might analyze that language differently. And that might contribute to how we are, how we think we could excel in that role, or whether or not to apply in that role. And I think when it comes to norms as well, like you said, there's an abundance of examples I could give just from my own personal experiences where, if you're outspoken, you're perceived as rude or blunt or, the B word, anything like that. Whereas actually in any other gender, in the male gender, you're considered, confident, assertive, career driven. Those brands and those stereotypes are definitely held against us in all industries, not just fire. So what do you think can be done to combat against these gender norms in terms of recruitment and retention?
Yeah, so I think as women, if we're aware of those social norms, perhaps when we're writing a job application, then we can make sure we don't undersell ourselves. We often might think of it as boastful to shout about our abilities and our talents. And to that point, I think it's a really good idea to get somebody who knows you quite well, to read your application and make sure that you haven't done that, and make sure you've given yourself adequate credit for your achievements. I think conversely, as interviewers, we could perhaps be mindful that women might be uncomfortable and less confident about self-promotion, simply because that isn't what society teaches us to do, and maybe bear that in mind as an interviewer. I think another issue that I think is a really important topic to bring in here is that women are more likely to be balancing work with the majority of family caring responsibilities. I mean, that could be children, aging parents, sick or disabled relatives. And I think if you're a caregiver, then remote and hybrid working has been a real game changer for us. But there are drastically reduced opportunities for networking and that. And I think that, in terms of recruitment and promotion, is a real barrier. It probably means that before work you've spent time caring, and then you've also got caring activities to do after work. It means that you can't network outside of hours, and if you're not in the office, you can't network during work hours. It means that working from home, does allow you to balance your work and your home better, but it can be really easy for managers to overlook home workers. We also know that how vital those networking opportunities are for career progression. And we do know that 3 times more women than men are responsible for most or all of the family's childcare. So potentially when we're talking about caregivers, we are talking in the majority about women, and that's a barrier to women progressing their career up the ladder.
No, I mean, definitely. I mean, I was a caregiver for about 6 years with my mother, and I had to move jobs, move location, move where I lived, because at the time, remote working or hybrid working wasn't a possibility. And I think, if one good silver lining can come out of the pandemic is that hybrid working and that format and that life work balance has shifted. And that should hopefully benefit a lot of people. And actually also a lot of people had the realization during the pandemic that actually they didn't need to work from 7 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night every single day, and to commute 2 hours to work and back again, to still, progress. And I think also raising, I'm sure we'll probably touch on this later, but raising the fire industry as an industry to go into as a career path, and a career gateway to young people and STEM subjects. At the moment, these types, like you said, the fire industry, the firefighting industry, for example, they're all subjects and careers that are branded more as kind of trade careers or things like that, which typically are when you're in line with construction and building, bricklaying, all of those different skills are targeted towards men and young boys in school, as opposed to all genders. So there's a lot to be done there from the ground up, I think, and to get women into those management roles as well, to start activating that change across the entire chain. And just speaking on raising awareness of Women Talking Fire Group, and obviously you guys are fairly new as an organisation, but you're already making great strides in the industry, and you're actually hosting a conference next month. Can you tell us a little bit about what attendees can expect from the day?
Yeah, so you're right. Women Talking Fire has a technical conference that we're holding, a technical fire safety conference. It will be on the 16th of November this year at the Leeds Hotel at the Queen's Hotel, in Leeds. We've got a really good lineup of speakers, I'm pleased to say. We've got the BSR coming, we've got legal experts, we've got structural engineers. It's going to be hosted by the amazing Jude Evans, so it should be fun. And what we've tried to do is make the discussion topics relevant to what's happening in fire safety today. So, for example, we've got Hannah Eales. She's a barrister and she's talking about legal pitfalls, because for me, I think that's a topic that we should be discussing right now. We've also got a panel discussion on structural materials in fire. Obviously, the Fire Safety Act. We've got the changes in, the clarifications, let's say, in legislations. Yeah, so
many amendments and changes this year.
Absolutely, but in terms of fire risk assessment and looking at the structure of the building, so that's to try and help people with that aspect. I think what we're trying to do is offer sort of some quality CPD, and also give people the opportunity to come together and network. And make it an inclusive and supportive environment for everybody who wants to come. It's held by Women Talking Fire, but we would genuinely welcome absolutely everybody. If people want more information, there's a website, womentalkingfire.co.uk, and we've also got a LinkedIn company page that's got all the details of the conference on too.
Fantastic. I'm sure we would love to attend as well. And actually, Hannah's one of the speakers here as well, so it should make a good transition of content. Thank you for that. Just to hop back on to gender diversity, from your experience, have there been significant shifts or improvements in gender diversity within the fire industry over the past decade or so? If so, are there any certain changes or initiatives that you could pinpoint that's helped catalyst this?
Yeah, so I've seen more women coming into the industry over the last 20 years, which is a great thing. What I'm keen to be a part of is initiatives that look at how we support women joining, staying and progressing in our industry. And I'm really pleased to see that we're having those conversations like we are today. I think that's a really important starting point. I'm also pleased to see that organisations are keen to support initiatives like Women Talking Fire. And I think that's a really important step, that organisations are keen to work with us. I'm also really pleased to see that organisations are starting to take on the concept of diversity of thought. And what that means is decision-making tables, having as many perspectives and experiences and viewpoints as possible. And we certainly need those decision makers to represent the viewpoints and experiences of everybody who's affected. And research shows that if you have higher levels of diversity amongst decision-making groups, then it does create better quality decisions. You consider more eventualities, you consider more possibilities. And if we have decision makers who all have the same background and experience, then effectively we only have one perspective in the decision making. So poorer quality decisions are made, and it's even more ineffective if you do have, you know, a less diverse group of decision makers. We do know that half of women avoid raising problems at work because they don't want to be seen as the problem. So not only do we need to make sure that everyone around the table is, you know, there's diversity around the table, that we're representing people, but we also need to make sure that we're creating an environment where constructive criticism and debate is valued and people feel appreciated for speaking up, rather than having a fear-based or a blame culture, which looks to sort of silence different points of view. I think, you know, we need those perspectives, everybody's perspectives, to make better quality decisions. I think that's one of the things that I'm really pleased to see happening right now.
No, definitely. And I think when you say for everybody to have a seat at the table, so to speak, I think what's also important in that aspect as well is the ability for people entering the industry to have somebody to aspire to and to mentor them, or to you know, to feel inspired by, to want to progress, for them to want to do better and to succeed in not just their current role, but, you know, beyond that. And it's very difficult for, you know, all types of people to relate to one traditional figurehead, as opposed to, you know, having a selection of people available who you can relate to in lots of different ways. You know, we're not just made up of one gender, or, you know, one background, one whatever, you know, with the kind of the growing prominence on intersectionality as well. We're made up of so many different pieces, and everyone is, you know, and those pieces are both, you know, oppression and privilege. But to be able to relate that to other people means that you're naturally going to feel safer in an environment, you're naturally going to feel better, you're going to work better, produce better work. So actually, like you said, it's not just about having, you know, a multitude of different perspectives, but it's about creating a company culture that is more accepting, diverse and happy, and your company will definitely, you know, benefit from that. So, you know, to me, it seems like a no-brainer, to be honest. But I know that these types of psychologies take a long time to change. It's not an overnight thing, and it's great to see that we're, you know, making clear strides. And are there any strategies or programs that the Women Talking Fire group propose or support to encourage more women to consider a career in the fire industry?
Well, Women Talking Fire are committed to working with some of the big industry expos. We're delighted to be partnering with you, and we're also at London Build, at FireX, and next year we're also going to be at the fire safety event, which is great. Yeah, like you say, we want to increase the visibility of women in the fire safety industry. This idea of role models is actually really important. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think one of the ways we do that is by partnering, and making sure that women are represented on the stage. You know, role models are important. We're also working with the Institute of Leadership and Management, and we're going to create a cohort of women who are already working in the fire safety industry, and they will be offered a postgraduate leadership course. So what we're trying to do is bring together our future female leaders. I think that's very exciting. And then also next year we're organising a number of events. We're doing public speaking workshops. That was as a result of feedback from our members, that's something that they would really like to enhance their skills on. I'm really pleased to say we're partnering with Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service and Cheshire Fire and Rescue Service, and we are doing firefighter awareness days, which will be really good fun, practical days, one in each county, next September as well.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, there's so many different things going on there. in all areas of the fire industry, not just passive, but the active side as well. So that's really great to hear. And just to hover for a second on, like you said, the role model aspect and the mentoring aspect that we've just mentioned. Can you discuss the importance of mentorship a little bit further and the representation in promoting gender diversity within the industry?
Yeah, so we need to be able to see others that look like us and have gone before us, so that we know there's an opportunity to get there, don't we? And I think there's something like 32% of women in technical engineering roles say that they are often the only woman in the room at work. And I can certainly relate to that. And I just wonder if decision makers and leaders are aware of what it feels like to be the only in a room. And so, I would like to take this opportunity to actually challenge those people who are watching. If you're a leader or a manager and you're not normally the only, try it. Go to an event where you are the only person like you and see what it feels like. That might give you some insight about how others feel when they're minority groups on a daily basis in the work environment. Does that make sense? And then so another thing I'd like to talk about at this point is male allyship. We are a male-dominated industry, and people like James Coomber are doing some amazing work in this space. I do think we need to get better about individuals and organisations understanding things like microaggressions and also micro-affirmations, so actions and behaviours that perhaps undermine women, and also those that people can do that support women. So I'll give you an example. One of the issues that really frustrates me is being interrupted or talked over. And we know that 1 in 4 women feel undermined or dismissed in meetings. We also know that 1 in 4 women don't feel supported by their line managers and senior management. So statistically, apparently, men interrupt women nearly 3 times as often as they interrupt men. I found that really interesting. So, I would encourage everyone who's watching, look out for others being interrupted, perhaps in a meeting or something, and also see how it's dealt with. Is it commented on? Is it accepted? What I do think is that if we're accepting that sort of behaviour, we're effectively shutting someone's point of view down. And then what sort of message does that send to everybody in the room? Does it say that everyone's voice is equal? Probably not. Are some people's viewpoint valued more than others? Probably. Are we going to encourage people to speak up if that's the sort of culture we've got? Possibly not. But then to be positive about it, there are things that are micro affirmations. So those are just little things that we can do to recognise and validate people, and we can build their confidence and trust, so we can listen to them. We can ask them actively to participate. We can acknowledge their expectations and their skills. We can recognise their achievements, and we can actually amplify their voice and tell other people about their ideas and their stories and give them the credit. So I think little things like that would actually go a long way to overcoming some of these barriers. I think that's actually putting some of those into place would actually be quite exciting.
No, definitely, and like I said, it's a culture. It's a culture change. The majority of these aren't difficult changes to make, but it's about the awareness, especially when it comes to the unconscious bias that you mentioned earlier. Is we're all products of our environment. No matter how we brought up in, what decade we're brought up in, what society we're brought up in, a lot of these unconscious biases aren't your fault, but it's about becoming aware of them and instigating a change and actively trying to work against them. If you shut off your mind to anybody else's perspectives, or if somebody tells you that what you've said made them uncomfortable because of XYZ, even if you don't understand it, you've got to try and listen and be empathetic and understand. So it's definitely a cultural shift, I think, in the working environment. And everything you said, Definitely. Fantastic. I think I'm in total agreement. And just beyond, gender diversity, 'cause obviously that's what we focused on with Women Talking Fire. But are there any other forms of diversity, e.g., obviously, racial, ethnic, and so on and so forth, that the industry should be focusing on? And is Women Talking Fire engaging and promoting these as well?
Yeah, so Women Talking Fire, as I said earlier, it was born out of a perceived need from my perspective, that women would value and benefit from an organisation like this. We're obviously keen to include everyone in what we're doing, as long as they subscribe to the concepts of, inclusivity and greater equity. We're keen to welcome everybody. Personally, I would love to get to the point where we don't need a women's group. I would love to be Talking Fire, not Women Talking Fire. However, we are not there yet. So maybe that's my goal, is before I retire, we get to the point of being Talking Fire rather than Women Talking Fire. What a great idea. I quite like that.
No, definitely it's something to aspire to, I think, is a very valued aspiration there. And what advice would you give to young women or young people who are considering a career in the fire industry and maybe hesitant due to its male-dominated nature?
Okay, so a quote that I found really helpful is, "Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated." And the fire safety industry, in my view, is a great career option. It's been a great career for me. But you do need to work in an environment that welcomes and supports you, just like you would in any industry. And I think it's really important for individuals to consider both the role that they're planning on applying for, but also the organisational culture when they're looking for a job. There will be organisations who understand your perspective and accommodate you. And I think there are important topics along those lines to be had when you're looking to join a company, in asking about more than just the job itself, in questioning about the organizational culture. Yeah.
No, definitely. And lastly, for those unfamiliar with Women Talking Fire, how can they get involved or support the group's efforts in promoting diversity across the fire industry?
Yeah, so I've mentioned the website, womentalkingfire.co.uk. You can find out more about us there. We also have a LinkedIn group, and we would love individuals to join the LinkedIn group. We've currently got 470 members, and it's growing every week, so that's fantastic. We're also really keen to hear from organisations who want to partner with us, like you have, either to run initiatives with us, work with us, maybe sponsor our events. And we'd also really like to put together some case studies within the fire safety industry based on some of the gender-based issues I've talked about today. So if there's a fire safety organisation who has addressed some of these, or who wants to address some of these issues, we'd love to hear from them too. And they can find our contact details on the website.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Andrea. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I really appreciate your time. And hopefully, in the next 5 Hour Live, we can talk about how far we've come just from today. And it'd be great to kind of keep track of that path and hopefully be partnered with Talking Fire. So thank you. If anybody has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Andrea directly on the platform, or you can visit the Women Talking Fire exhibitor booth as well, where you can get links to websites, so on and so forth. Thank you.